Very excited to welcome to the stage Sarah Cacchetti and Aaron Crow from AWS to talk about earning trust and identity at scale. Ladies.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about our product already this week. We wanted to talk a little bit for the first time about how we think about identity internally at Amazon. We haven't talked a lot about this publicly, but we wanted to share some of our investment and our philosophy around how we do things inside. So Amazon culture is a little bit peculiar, and so we wanted to talk about how that culture lends itself to our investments in identity. We hire very passionate people, and one of the problems with hiring passionate people is that if you tell them what to do, they will leave. And so you have to give them quite a bit of autonomy. And for that reason, Amazon is upside down from the way that most companies work. And this is the last stock image you will see. I'm sure you guys are sick of stock images. So instead of doing those, I used an artificial intelligence engine to do the rest of my slides. So these are all from DALL-E. This is supposed to be like a champagne tower. So most companies cascade down, right? The person at the top of the org chart decides what's going to happen next. And then they tell their SVPs, they tell their VPs, and the people at the end of the line are told, here's your job, do your job. And at Amazon, we're the other way around. This is supposed to be like a stalagmite, is that the ones that go up? So we accrete kind of from the bottom up. The decisions are made by the people in the field. They're made by the people who are resolving the tickets, the people who are writing the code, the people who are talking to the customers. We have a process called Operational Plan 1 that we do every summer. And the way that we do that is that we start at the bottom so that we can be very agile in response to our customers. The problem and the consumer pain doesn't have to make it all the way up to the CEO before it gets addressed. It can get addressed right there on the ground. I like how this runner has like a weird shoe. So that gives our builders a lot of autonomy and agility. And this makes us really fast, and it means that everybody can kind of do whatever they want, which also gives us a lot of ownership. The way that we structure our teams is that we call them 2 pizza teams because each team should be small enough to be fed with 2 pizzas. Each 2 pizza team has full ownership of their product. So this is from product inception to launch, maintenance, new features. They own everything, security. And so you might think that this would lead us to the idea of autonomous identity. Let's let every team pick what they want to do for their identity solution. And if you are a security architect, as Aaron and I are, this is probably your face when you think about autonomous identity. This is horrifying, right? This is similar to if you had an office letting each team pick whatever door is nearest them. Like, what lock would you like on that door? Do you want a biometric? Do you want a pin pad? Do you want a physical key? You can have whatever you want. This is a terrible idea, right? And so this is where our typical Amazon development philosophy really conflicts with what we want to do for identity. So we had to decide where we put identity in the org chart. Do we distribute identity experts across every team? Well, as you can see from the small number of people in this room, there are not enough identity experts in the world to have one on every team at Amazon. So we have to put them somewhere together inside the org chart, and that way also they can learn from each other. And so we thought about putting them under security or putting them under marketing. Technically, they're an engagement funnel. And we ended up putting them on our platform team. So the platform team handles things that need to be consistent for customers throughout the whole experience. So this is things like billing, right? Every AWS service needs to be able to have a line item on the bill. And console, every AWS service needs to be able to have a website where customers can click buttons that looks the same, that has a consistent look and feel. Likewise, identity needs to have a consistent security bar and a consistent usability bar for every service at AWS. So we're on the platform team, and we try to maintain our autonomy by making a flexible, centralized identity system so that we have one tech stack that we can patch, that we can monitor, that we can upgrade, but it's configurable. so that all of our many lines of business, which each have different risk profiles, different threat models, different levels of security and usability that they want, can configure in their own way. And so Aaron's going to talk to you a little bit about how we actually implement that.
You folks hear me? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. So my name is Erin Crow, and I manage our user authentication product teams. I also have the privilege of sitting on the FIDO board to represent all of Amazon. So as Sarah said, we are upside down at Amazon, and that means that outside of a few of the core top-level values like customer trust and security coming first, there aren't a whole lot of hard rules or top-down mandates about who gets to build what or what those services are supposed to do, as long as they're solving our core customer problems. And beyond just creating the security architect's nightmare, like that terrifying image that Sarah showed you before, allowing groups to go off and create their own little bespoke silos of identity creates also less flexibility for us over time. You might have this pretty little bespoke polished island to the customer for a while on the outside, but inevitably you'll start to build up a lot of debt. You'll become very bottom heavy as teams have to then go and maintain, update, and integrate new solutions across every different service where they've implemented identity. So really quick though, to step back and talk a little bit about AWS if you're not super familiar with our services. From Amazon Cognito to AWS Identity Center, we have many, many different use cases that we're supporting. It's everything from single-person hobby projects to the mega-sized enterprises to SIAM and every shade of gray that exists and overlaps in between that. And no matter what type of customer we're talking about, we approach them with the expectation that they all fundamentally want really similar things. They all want to have good experiences. They all want to have highly available and highly secure services, but they just express those requirements in really different ways. And sometimes those requirements are expressed in ways that are pretty well at odds with each other, which gives our teams, especially in the authentication space, a pretty big challenge because those customers may have different thresholds for things like what friction they'll accept in terms of trade-off for security. It also means that if we believe that identity is one of the few rare exceptions where we should centralize our services and tell people what to do, those services need to be really capable. They need to be feature-rich so that they can extend to whatever business line we're talking about and ensure that identity remains a business enabler and never a business blocker. Effectively, we have to make the identity equivalent of a Swiss Army knife. Doing any of it at all, much less doing all of it, is much easier said than it is done. So I'm going to share a little bit about our philosophy on how we build and bias for flexibility while remaining grounded in what our customers' real-world needs are as we pursue some of these higher objectives, like promoting strong authentication. So if we talk about multi-factor authentication specifically, and we have this understanding that we're driving towards a unified perimeter, one might reasonably assume that that means that we also want to only support one type of security model. We might support then also one type of MFA. We could bias for what is the strongest, most sensitive customer need that we have and only support something that would meet that objective, like, for example, security keys. Or more realistically, when we got started in the cloud business, it might have been hardware tokens like Gemalto tokens that some of our customers are still using. And that's a single investment. It would have given us one security model and one perimeter to maintain. And in a world where most or all of our customers accepted that they have to walk around with these tokens and keys on their keychains all the time, and their finance departments happily approve purchase orders for anything from 10 to tens of thousands of different keys, that might have worked well. But while that works really well for one particular type of customer, it leaves out a lot on the usability and cost requirements that other customers have. It also would have made us really brittle over time as authentication needs and trends change, and we would have been really reliant on one single model. Pardon me. There we go. Enter FIDO, and specifically FIDO 2. FIDO, the first version with U2F, gave us an improvement in the security model over hardware tokens, giving us something that was cryptographically secure and phishing resistant, but it really didn't solve for all of the usability and cost considerations that we also saw. Then, of course, through the collaboration with the W3C and the FIDO Alliance came WebAuthn and FIDO 2, which gave us all of these new form factors to play around with. We could then have security keys as well as the platform authenticators. And we've invested really heavily in FIDO2, and we continue to invest in the development of these specifications fundamentally because we believe that FIDO supports greater flexibility. We have to have fewer trade-offs between our users' experience and their security. Those customers that have really strict models can continue to use the hardware-bound security keys if they so desire, or they can get a similar type of protection leveraging the local biometric authenticators that are within the laptops and mobile phones that they carry around with them every single day. And best of all, for my teams, so the central authentication teams, this is all available in centralized implementations. So we're at Authenticate 2022, and I wasn't stuck under a rock for the entire year or the week, so I would be remiss if I didn't take just a beat to talk a little bit about the continued evolution of FIDO and multi-device credentials, or you may also hear passkeys a lot this week. I think that we will continue to see use cases, especially maybe in regulated enterprise environments, that demand more control over how credentials are generated and used within their environments. These customers, for example, may not want to enable the use of credential sharing at all. But on the consumer side, I expect that this could actually be an enabler for many different types of customers that have been hesitant to adopt any form of MFA or strong authentication because of the barriers to ease of use and ease of recovery. So it's still very early days, we think, for multi-device credentials and passkeys, but we're following this development really closely. We'll continue working closely with our customers and with the FIDO Alliance to understand and shape the continued evolution of these specifications. So that's all we need, right? We've got FIDO2. We have a couple different form factors that are supported there, and those can give us different security models for our customers as well. We don't need to do anything else, right? Well, not exactly. Because while I'm really excited to see growing adoption for FIDO2 year over year, and I think that the continued development of these specifications will break down barriers for customer usability, and it's going to make strong authentication more of the norm. I just don't think that we're at a place yet where, as an industry, we can fully say goodbye to some of the other methods that we have. You might have heard these referred to as classic or legacy MFA in various sessions over the last week. But if we want our services to not only be technically feature-rich, but to actually enjoy broad adoption across the many different types of customers that we're serving, we have to acknowledge that at this point, there hasn't been one single model, no matter how good we think that is as security professionals, that works for absolutely everyone. So let's think again for a moment about some of those differing and occasionally at odds personas and use cases that I mentioned earlier. Pardon me. At hospitals and highly regulated environments like banks, you have customers that have really complex threat models. And especially in the last couple of years with the increase in password-based attacks, more and more of these enterprises are coming to us with the expectation that they want to support MFA. They're becoming a lot more involved in the conversation that was previously mostly had in just security circles like our own. And generally speaking, although these customers still have usability requirements, of course, they're a little bit more willing to accept some additional friction to secure their environments and their sensitive data. Or at least they have a couple very motivated administrators and regulators behind them that are willing to accept that on their behalf. So these customers are satisfied with things like FIDO2, with TOTP apps, and different types of hardware. But when we think about the everyday people, our retail shoppers, people that are consuming different streaming services, consumers have really different risk profiles, and they evaluate their needs on online platforms very differently. If you were here on Monday, you might have heard Bob Lord saying that everyday people don't really talk in the same kind of language that we do around security. They're much more indexed on what's easy to use. And then likewise, the businesses that are supporting those users are also very sensitive to user frustration, because user frustration or perceived friction can result not just in bad experiences, but it would maybe make customers less likely to convert and impact their revenue overall. So in spaces like Amazon Cognito, where we support developers that are building identity management system for their own end consumers, they've asked us to support different modalities like SMS TOTPs. SMS might not provide the kind of assurance that most of our enterprise customers are looking for, But it enjoys broad adoption. Customers are pretty used to this ritual, even beyond the US, to different international locations. So it creates this low barrier to adoption. It's important to take a moment, I think, when we're talking about how could we weigh and accept that customers might have different security assurance needs or security models, to talk about one of the core principles that we use when we're making these decisions about our shared responsibility model. Shared responsibility at AWS means that we're responsible for securing the infrastructure and the services that run on that infrastructure. But we delegate and empower our customers to select the different configurations and settings that they need to achieve the security assurance that they're looking for, that the experience that they want to have for their businesses, because we trust that they know their requirements the best. And as our teams are probably pretty sick of hearing me say at this point, because I say it so often, any form of MFA is always going to be better than no MFA at all. So we're really happy to continue supporting whatever modalities our customers tell us they will adopt and use. So we focus on investing in these central services, and then we invest a whole lot of time in investigating and understanding and supporting all of the different permutations of use cases that our customers might require. But how do we actually keep this perimeter tidy in a company that is otherwise pretty decentralized by design? The thing is, it's really not enough to just build these services, hope for the best, and expect that the rest of the company is going to come along with us, even if we believe that we've covered all of the bases. We really have to nurture an ethos within our business communities of this security-first mindset. You might expect that an exercise like this across the scale of as many builders that we have at AWS is a little bit like herding a bunch of cats. It's really not like that, though. It's a lot more like if this cat's also had jetpacks. But I've been at Amazon for about 10 years now, and in that time, I've seen us get pretty good at developing different air traffic control mechanisms for these feline aviators. Sarah described a little bit about how we view focusing identity investments into central teams and that people don't really scale. And that's absolutely true. People, let alone identity experts, do not scale. But while people don't scale very well, culture does. For example, in AWS security, we leverage security-minded talent that have deep local business context by enabling builders to volunteer to become what we call security guardians, or remaining embedded within their respective teams. We support these guardians with guardrails and expectations and SOPs that help educate them about where the bar is that we need to maintain for security, when we expect teams to follow along with prescribed standards and established tools, and then give them flags to tell us when it might be time to evolve those services further. And we've repeated this kind of cultural investment in multiple other areas across the company. Strong authentication in particular is an area where we can't expect all of our teams across AWS or across any of your companies as well to be experts. But we do have to put in the work to help teams understand what options are available for their customers and why driving towards strong authentication as a norm across all of AWS, not just within our identity and security teams, is fundamental to our mission of living and breathing security as priority zero. So in AWS, we pulled together a virtual team of identity experts and product owners across all of our business lines, not just in AWS, but also into the retail organization as well, to collaborate on their roadmaps for strong authentication, to share feedback about any kind of difficulties they're having with implementation, as well as adoption strategies. And this process is working. Month over month, in the short amount of time that we've had this program in place, I'm seeing more and more teams come to us trying to learn more about FIDO2, learn more about strong authentication, and figure out how they can help us promote strong authentication to their customers and their teams. Best of all, this is not just creating an internal, growing and creating our internal community of identity and strong authentication experts. It's helping us introduce more folks into the standards world, and it's also helping ensure that when we go to work with the FIDO Alliance and the other organizations within this industry that are working on strong authentication, that we're speaking as one voice that can represent all of these different complex use cases that we manage across our different businesses. What I like about this, and why I wanted to end on this note about culture today, is that I think that the fundamental action here, which is growing communities that share a security-first mindset, the growing awareness and understanding of the value and necessity of strong authentication, can apply to organizations of any size at all. Your organization might not be operating at a size that requires you to invest a whole lot of time in organizing and understanding how you organize your people and your architecture to maintain an identity perimeter. In some organizations, that might just come together a little bit more naturally. We develop these mechanisms because we have to, but these initiatives all started very, very small. They grew, and they're continuing to grow today. And I really think that this is a security-first vision that we can drive in organizations of all sizes, as long as you have just one very interested, passionate person that can help get the ball rolling. That's our time for today. We would love it if you'd connect with us on Twitter. Thank you so much for taking some time to listen.